course. He's Han fucking Solo.
That's one of his main adventure skills. It's just how to get out of way station checks. Customs checks. Well, yeah, he's a fucking smuggler. Passing customs checks is like the whole thing.
So yesterday I ended up on this website for an obscure Russian republic. And this website is the best goddamn thing I can... This is the best website I've ever been on. I'm gonna have to, describe this. Basically, it's like, this is an official Russian government website, and so the background is, has Doge memes in it.
Okay.
And there's pictures of everything's in Cyrillic text, so you don't know what's going on. There's a bunch of ads for weird Russian telephone companies. There's a bunch of other photos. One of the photos is Darth Vader participating in some kind of tulip ceremony that's native to this thing. There's a picture of a fishing competition.
As an advertisement for the coming tulip ceremony.
Yes. It's the most Russian. There's pictures of hot girls riding horses.
Oh, sick.
There's they look it's straight out of the 80s or something. This is this website is if this is Borat in real life.
Yeah.
This is I swear to, and it's it's the greatest thing ever. And there's pictures of really unphotogenic people doing strange things and just crudely photoshopped. It's hilarious. I wish I had a visual on this, but I'll text you the website. It's great.
Yeah, text me the website and I'll cut in some snapshots over your talking about it.
Okay, it's beautiful.
What's the country?
It's the Republic of, I think it's called Kalakmia or something like that. It's Kalakmia. I think it's like a Central Asian former Soviet republic.
Mm-hmm.
It's still part of Russia. It's I think it's somewhere around Azerbaijan, the Black Sea, that whole area, kind of South Central or Central Asia. But it's actually the only Buddhist region in Europe. I mean, calling Europe is a stretch, but technically it's Europe, and it's been Buddhist since the 5th century, and
but they're Eastern European, white.
Yeah.
Cool.
And they're Buddhists.
That's super cool. It's
Borat in real life.
Yeah.
It's fucking great. It sounds like a great place to visit.
Living their best life.
Dude,
sounds
they have it's so funny. They don't exactly look white. They look more they look like people from Central Asia. They, dark hair. Almost they look like Persians, basically.
Sure.
Those kind of, just dark, kind of lighter skin, but dark eyes, dark hair.
Cyrillic is just such a cool word, aesthetically.
Cyrillic.
Yeah.
You know where that comes from?
No. It's it seems like a weird word to designate. I always think it's weird when there's a different word to designate the alphabet of the language. Why isn't it the Russian alphabet? Why aren't they Russian letters? Why are they Cyrillic letters?
Well, because I think
there's something similar happening with the Chinese language too, I think.
The word alphabet itself contains reference to alpha, which is ultimately a Phoenician word. So I think Latin, comes ultimately from Greek, which comes from Phoenician. So I think that alphabet is actually contains implicitly a Latin, the word alphabet means a set of phonetic characters, whereas we use phonetic as a synonym for, or we use phonetic and to have a different meaning of phonetic in the sense that you have phonemes are the primary glyphs as opposed to ideograms or things of that nature. The Cyrillic alphabet, I guess, if you were to say that, the Cyrillic character set was named for Saint Cyril, who was this Russian, he was a missionary to Russia. I don't know when, while ago. I think he was sent by like the Eastern Orthodox
Cyril.
churches. Cyril, yeah.
Cyril.
Yes. And so he came up with a bunch of arbitrary squiggly symbols to represent the Russian language and the sounds in the Russian language, and
wow,
that was his mark on history.
Someone just did that for them.
Yep. They just showed up and were like,
this is it, guys.
So instead of, he was original. Instead of just being like, I'm going to use Latin letters and map.
He turned the N the other way around.
He's like, got to make it Russian. Got to make it. He's backwards. In Russia.
Upside down.
In Russia, letter writes you. Everything this is so backward here.
Yeah, he just shows up. Man, it's so backwards here. What? I have an idea for a written
in Russia,
language.
Darth Vader is nice guy. He's participating in traditional tulip festival.
I flashed back when you were mentioning Phoenicia, and is that the name of the nation, Phoenicia?
Yeah, the Phoenicians, I think, were like a merchant trading nation, and they came up with letters that represent that. Like they actually think there was like Aleph. Maybe that's the Greek. No. Alpha is Greek. Aleph is the ox, represents the ox head. That was the original glyph, and then it went to Omega or something. I don't know where Z came from.
I had this young adult novel growing up I think it was called Detectives in Togas. And it was like what's the boy version of Nancy Drew?
Hardy Boys.
Yeah, it was like Hardy Boys in ancient Greece.
Oh, of course.
it was sick as fuck. And
that's cool.
All the boys like had to go to school and like chisel shit in stone tablets.
Oh, that G-rated historical fiction is so wholesome.
Yeah. And the ambiance was, like slaves and donkeys and push carts and the market.
Those are
stuff.
great. Those are great books for kids. I feel like.
I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
I was there, cool. Man. I was embedded.
Where you have like all these. It's like you just took like contemporary, modern culture and just like totally naively transposed it into an ancient culture.
Yeah, you just put a new skin over it.
We're like,
ancient Greece skin.
The Greek police detective, and then we went down to the ancient Greek police department, and there was a case of like.
It was so cool.
It's a gentle introduction.
Yeah. It was a more magical time growing up reading fiction and fantasy and the vividness with which I could inhabit those worlds. And I wonder what place reading even has in my adult life and in 2021 in general. It was on the train of my business meeting with Jade last night. That came on the heels of thinking a lot more about writing and the written word and asking myself if it has a place in content culture at all anymore, and what kind of writing can I even like have the patience to sit through, because like the last maybe 2 or 3 books that I've like physically read, I've just like interspersed it with the same audiobook, and I don't even read it. I just like read it a bit, then audiobook it a bit, then read it a bit until it's finished.
Interesting. So like when you're driving, you listen to it, and then you right.
Because when I'm driving, I'm not going to stop reading it if I have the audiobook right there.
You're not going to read it while you drive? Just look up every couple seconds. It's no big deal.
But then when I am physically reading, like, it feels like a fucking novelty, And I'm like the chief reader. Like, I've read
a novel?
So much. I've read big ass novels multiple times.
In a world where reading a novel has regained novelty, what is a novel? What is novel?
A man dares to enact the novel act of reading a novel.
Well, that's actually I never really thought about that before. That raises interesting questions about the etymology of the word.
Of novel?
Novel.
I love the word itself. It's like, it seems to imply a very well-made novel, like a well-built, like, jacket.
So clearly, if I had to guess, clearly novel comes from nova, which is Latin for new. So, that's in the meaning of the word novelty, newness, as it were. So, a novel...
And I think a novel actually definitionally refers to a fiction novel, too.
Yes. A novel, it's in the sense that it's a
true.
new idea. What's a novel? It's a new idea. Mm-hmm. Because fiction is new. Nonfiction is a reflection of something that exists.
And there was some indeterminate moment where people stopped making myths or stopped recording the myths that they grew up with and started coming up with their own ideas. Maybe that's like the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. That's like some of the first instances. But then they were just that was
folk tales.
That was still just folk tales. That that was an unconscious process. Mm-hmm. Like the folk stories that have just always been there.
The process of consolidation.
Just tradition, spoken word passing down.
Yeah.
At some point there is a conscious development of like, I can just make my own story now.
Yeah, I think that coincides with modern culture, because the emergence of the modern world is the idea that we've run out of easily available, mineable resources laying on the surface, and so we have to start synthesizing our own novelty.
I started trying to write a novel when I first quit my job at Synthesis.
Synthesis? Interesting.
Do you know what the Synthesis is
no.
first? Okay. It's the demographic is Chico.
Oh, yeah. This is the magazine thing you used to write for. Mm-hmm. Yes. I just didn't know it was called Synthesis.
Weekly paper, weekly culture arts print thing. And
that's so amazing that I suggested that you have to start synthesizing new ideas, and you're like, yes, I used to write for a magazine called Synthesis. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. I did not know that was its name either. Sorry.
Yeah.
Continue.
Oh, I started trying to write a novel when I quit Synthesis, because that working for them, or the only way I could make working for them interesting enough for me was to write a fiction column in it and have like a 500 to 700 word story that basically begins and ends within that context and has a cartoon that a friend artist made for the story. And I was learning to write fiction for the first time ever by way of leveraging my job at the paper. And when I quit, I started trying to write a novel because I was like, it seemed like the only way to keep my fiction rhythm going is to like scale up the goal. And I got, I think like between 10 and 15,000 words deep before it got too big and unwieldy. And I basically didn't know what the conflict was. I didn't clearly have what the character's character arc needed to be, or like what the thing they had to overcome was and why. And I just cared for the characters so much. It felt like I'd be arbitrarily like making something bad happen to them for like just so I'd have a story, and I didn't want to do that to them.
Oh, okay. That's good that you care about your characters. I mean, you did like step one correctly. You had the character development clearly. But what about, couldn't you, I guess if you make something happen to them though, you're committing to writing a happy ending. you're committing. If you write conflict and you care about the character, you're committing to writing out redemption too. You can't quit right in the middle.
Well, I started with a kind of happy ending and a kind of timeless fulfillment.
Oh, okay. So this was like a
that they were in, and exploring reality from the lens of that. Like partly as my own wish fulfillment of like a fantasy realm I wished I was living in. And then I didn't know where to go from there. Like it seemed like to go anywhere exciting from there to like get them to like a more grounded fulfillment felt like arbitrarily.
This is the problem with
introducing
utopia.
Hardship.
This is the problem with utopia. Yeah, it reminds me of some quote from some old philosopher guy or whatever who was like something like, if man ever really achieved utopia, like the first thing he would have to do is like destroy everything or something. Like, I don't remember how it was, what the exact quote was, but that's paraphrasing. Basically, like if you ever really got what you thought you wanted, you'd have to introduce some chaos into the system so that you would...
See, I think that's a very elementary, immature understanding of mine and that guy's too. Like, it's easy to see the experience I'm having in my life right now is completely utopian to the eyes of my 15-year-old self. Like, the things I've set out to do and then grasped with both hands and achieved things, it's like mind-blowing from those perspectives.
From your 15-year-old perspective.
I did not ever have to like stop and introduce more hardship voluntarily into the thing.
Yeah, no. That's what I took from that quote also, was that I think the meaning of that, the inner meaning of that, is that the whole concept of utopia is illusory, because the more you progress towards a goal, the more challenges you unlock for yourself, and so you don't have to try. You never have to sabotage yourself. It's never necessary, because life's going to hand you new challenges as you encounter them and you solve the ones that you have in front of you.
That's the use of utopia conflated with the word perfect, conflated with the Christian dogmatic view of what heaven is, which are all different versions of stagnation and death, and non-change, non-development. A finished point beyond which no further development is necessary or possible. Yeah,
I think even the concept of the word perfect in English is obscure. Its real meaning is obscured because we're not aware of the roots of it. But like, one of the synonyms in English, like the idea of something being quintessential, the quintessence derives from the root for the word five. And 5 was thought even by the Greeks to be like a perfect number.
Okay.
Because it was the Platonic solid that they identified as like the symbol of the world. So it was like that languages all over the world. At least the other example I'm familiar with is Finnish, which the word for perfect is täydellinen, which means, or no, I said it wrong. It's täydellinen, which means
täydellinen.
Yeah, or if you'd say like, if something's perfect, you say like täydellisesti, or like, but the concept is täydellinen, which means literally fullness. Because täys means full, and linen means like having the character of. So like, it's like fullness. So like, if you say like, oh, täydellinen, it means complete, full.
Yes.
That's all there is.
Yes.
There's no further changes you could make to it. So it's stagnation in a word. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That like, or so in you say that as a compliment because like, oh, it could not be improved. But careful what you wish for. If you want the world to be perfect, then
what you really are asking for is death.
Yeah, you're asking for non-existence. You're asking to press cancel on the entire experiment.
Yes.
And stop, pause. That's what you're saying. So I suppose if you want to pay respect to in a metaphorical way, to some sub-element of the world, you can say that it's finished. But really, you can't say that about the cosmos. Can never be perfect.
it can be perfect according to values and parameters that a person chooses. It just doesn't stop there once it gets there.
Which is why I say it can't ever maintain a state of perfection. It changes faster than you can.
Yes.
And I don't think any person could understand all of everything enough to be able to formulate an idea of what they would like. Even your desires are limited by your ability to conceive of them.
I think the word, the reality that word is very shittily trying to point to is so beyond anything that word perfect can like encapsulate. Like my experiences with like on shrooms and stuff, with moments that are like, that's what people are trying to grope for by saying words like perfect. It's like, that's the weakest fucking word shape fucking possible to point at this thing, this fullness that's in a state of becoming. And it's beyond perfect when I've had beatific visions of that nature. It's like, perfection is a living, moving thing that then just takes the fullness and fulfillment of basic values for granted and then goes on from there to get way fucking better. So people shy away from fulfilling goals because they think of perfection as the end point, and they rightly understand intuitively that that's death, that's the end of the journey, but then they use that as an excuse not to fulfill their goals, because then like, well, what will I do with myself after I fulfill that goal? Like, they don't understand that just every finishing point is just a new beginning point.
Yeah, it's good. It's useful to remember that. I should remember that more often, because I always somehow use arbitrary finishing points as a way to map out my progress, and then I get attached to the idea of completing things, and then I have to go. That's funny. I actually ran into Ade at Stobel, or Stoble, as I've been calling it. I don't know why.
Stoble coin.
Stoble coin. Oh God, no one give them any ideas. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to afford that coffee shop. I'm going to walk in and be like, "Can I get a small coffee?" They'll be like, "That's $25,000. You should have bought earlier. You can only pay in Stoble coin." God damn it. No. Yeah. We were just, one of the things we were talking about was, he was saying, repeating what you had previously, I think, told me about, taking breaks and stuff consciously, off days, off weeks, stuff like that, instead of working yourself to the point of exhaustion.
Playing the rest is how you say it as a musician.
Playing the rest. That's a perfect way.
Referring to sheet music where it marks the rests.
I know. I actually know what that is. I've heard that before when I was a little kid, when I was in third grade, and I was in flute. I was doing flute, and they said that. They said play the rest to keep your rhythm. So you're like da da da.
Yep.
And it's just Yeah.
But Ade was talking about that.
Yeah, he was doing a futile effort to convince me of the benefits of that. I know in my mind, but not in my heart. In my heart, I think I'll just continue grinding until physical limitations cause me to quit for a while, and then I'll climb back onto the horse.
Well, based on what you just said 60 seconds ago, God damn it, what was it? According to what you just said 60 seconds ago, you get overhyped on the finishing point. And so you go chasing for that carrot. And the meta understanding that helps Ade and I understand how important playing the rest is the meta understanding that getting to that finishing point is actually the most challenging part, because it's a new beginning point of a bigger quest line.
Yeah.
And since it's more or less infinite like that, I better start developing the skills of playing the rest now.
Yeah. That's true.
Because I can get to the finishing point, and then that'll be its own evaluation where you obviously hope to have grown all your skills to the max by the time you get there. And resting is one of the skills. Can't get away from its necessity. I think you die sooner with lack of sleep than you do of lack of food and water.
Interesting. You know that
I have no idea if that's true or not.
I mean, right. It's true in the context of what you're saying. Whether it's physiologically true, who fucking knows? I don't even think science knows. And by science, I mean, I guess, scientific institutions. I don't think we really understand sleep or nutrition or things of that nature, things that are, or the immune system for that matter, things that are like highly adaptive and stuff. Because I was reading this interesting paper about the effect of sleep or lack thereof on people who have depression. Mm-hmm. And it was counterintuitive, because it turns out empirically that when people, if you're a normal baseline, this is not going to affect you, but if you're someone who is clinically depressed, sleeping does not help you. In fact, being sleep deprived will make you less depressed in the short term. So, which is fascinating. And the theory is that being depressed corresponds to an overabundance of, or no, a lack of connectivity in your brain, but specifically the amygdala, which is like regulates your emotions and stuff like that. So, or is like associated, I don't really know if you could say it regulates it, but so, you know, like when you eat something like, eat shrooms, so you have psilocybin, and that increases the connectivity among disparate parts of your brain, and you become less depressed. Turns out, sleeping for a long time, actually, like one of the functions of sleep is to prune extraneous connections. Because you go throughout the day, you make a lot of associations, and then the sleeping is a process of consolidation where links between things that are not as important to you for whatever reason are like severed, and so you get like a less connected brain overall, which is good because all connections can't be maintained, otherwise you would descend into madness. But when you're depressed, you're starting with a deficit of connectivity. So sleeping more can put you deeper into that. If you stay up a little bit and you let some of those connections persist and don't let your brain prune them, you actually feel less depressed. Now, probably you have to sleep eventually, and otherwise you won't survive. But it's just an interesting. So I don't know if this is a treatment for being depressed, but it's an interesting, like, window onto maybe the neural correlate of why people who are depressed say that their world seems to be shrinking. It's like the exact opposite of eating shrooms and having your world expand.
Yes.
It's this volume almost, and the volume of the world as you perceive it corresponds to the connectivity of your brain and its ability to model the world. And if magic and enchantment seems gone, it's because you can't perceive it. You can't perceive the interconnectedness of the world.
Well, usually what you have in depression is sleeping too much.
Yeah.
And sleeping over 8 hours drugs your brain and drugs your body and starves your body and starves your brain, and the muscles get cramped because they're not being used. And when you're depressed, from my own experience, you're using sleep to blank out reality.
Which is like a feedback cycle, which just makes you more...
And it makes you wake up tired and unable to deal with reality, and you just want to get back to void and non-existence as soon as possible. I think more than a lack of sleep, simply regularity of sleep, and a nap in the middle is the best prescription generally for depression. Just going to bed at the same time every night, waking up at the same time every morning is and because sleeping in is what drives all this damage home for a depression individual.
Sleeping in is terrible for you. I would not recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, I have to do it a lot.
Well, you have extenuating circumstances.
Because I often, stay up for 20 hours, 24 hours, 26 hours straight in this specific time of my life. One of our prompts was what race, what gender, what nationality, maybe even what time period would you live?
Oh yeah, well when I was thinking about this...
Would you be if you lived another life?
When I was contemplating this question, I had taken the whole time period thing for granted. Like I was thinking...
Me too.
Okay, all right.
Apparently. I've felt kind of intuitively that I have like a big black chick, like a big black mom kind of life going on somewhere in the background.
Yeah.
Or it's like I'm not sure if it's like a kinship or like just by virtue of being like visual and experiential opposite to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That it like seems like karmically like guaranteed that I'm living that life. And like, again, intuitionally, I see this like 12-year-old Japanese schoolboy kind of guy. But if I could choose, yeah, I guess, I'm not even sure where this is coming from, but if I could choose, I think I would choose that big black mom life. See what that's about.
Big black mom?
Yeah.
What, have you examined this enough to figure out like what about big black mom energy you what appeals to you?
Not in the slightest.
Honest answer. Cool. Well, that's the starting point.
My first association is remembering one of the life-changing concerts Ade and I attended, and I'm sure I've mentioned it to you before in my and Ade's like.
Wait, is this
history.
Like? Sorry, is this Nina Simone energy? Like Nina Simone?
Is she big?
Well, she's a big personality.
Because if she's not physically big,
okay, all right, so
I can't be bothered.
Well, she's probably thick. She's like, I'm just thinking of that iconic image of her. I think it's like on the cover of like one of her like something. She's like a towel wrapped around her head, and she has like this face like, fuck with me. But it's not like aggressive. It's like just confident. It's like it's like or
Word.
something. And it's like kind of her lips and her eyes are just saying like, and it's like it's iconic because of that. She has like this. That's the image.
There's some serious.
Yeah, there's some
coming
exactly.
Through.
It's attitude, right? That's cool. That's like cool. You know what I mean? Like.
So not Nina Simone necessarily, but my first association trying to like critically contemplate this intuition of mine is to a musical show that Ade and I went to.
Oh yeah, right.
We were high on acid, and because we were sharing the experience together so much, and then like trying to figure out how to like use English again after in each other's company. Like there was some telepathic like imprinting that happened on each other in the midst of just trying to like help each other out by remembering words. So I don't remember if it was his impression or mine, but it became both of ours by articulating it out loud that in the course of the show, it felt like we were inside a big black chick.
Yeah.
It felt like this big black mom goddess was the container of the 500 or so people in this show having this crazy fucking musical experience.
Partaking of this.
Like we felt, I felt held.
Yeah.
I felt held and buoyed, but also like challenged with this real attitude, like pushing forward confidence too. But held like a mom holding you, but a big fucking mom, like a big mom.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So the example that came, or the thing that came to my mind, not the example,
Your choice?
My choice was imagining myself as an Asian fisherman who had one of those.
That's sick.
Who had like one of those like ancient Chinese style like junk vessels that was like had like the really oriental looking sail that has like is like folded kind of.
And we've got all these assorted knickknacks and bric-a-brac accumulated in your boat.
Yeah, and it's just like no, you know what I mean? And like no, you know, and like everyone's like swarming around and they're like chaos. But like you have like this like quiet dignity. And you don't say a whole lot.
Like everyone's going past you in the river, like doing their own thing?
Yeah. And you're like, you have like this, and okay, it's not exactly the same, but because this is more of a Western conception of it, but you know the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner? It's like this famous poem, and it's like about, I can't recite it, but it speaks to this kind of solitude and really kind of quietude, but it's like quietude amongst bustling activity where you're deeply in the flow of doing all this stuff and you're navigating with deftness this complex, cluttered environment, and you're like...
That's very Chinese.
And you're just... Exactly, and you're gliding down perhaps like a river and everything's hazy and... This
equanimous... action.
Yeah, and you're just in balance. You're in this really dynamic, metastable flow, and like I sometimes imagine that like that would be quite a life.
You certainly use the word Tao a lot.
Yeah, I do. To me, Tao is a beautiful idea, or it's not even an idea. It's a beautiful feeling.
It seems like a base prerequisite for existence.
Yeah, I think a life where you just set out early in the morning, and then you return near sunset, and you walk into your hut and your family's there and you just bring like the fish and that's your life. Like that'd be kind of a beautiful life, I think, because you are removed from society for the better part of the day and you're just on your little boat, but then you come back and you rejoin and you have this rhythm. That'd be kind of cool. And as long as you didn't die in some sort of maelstrom or something like that. And I think there's probably a lot of loneliness of being a fisherman too, but I think I think that life would be kind of cool.
Well, you have that experience of making your livelihood live or die, and you come home with your catch.
Yeah.
And the work hours accrete into physical nourishment right in front of you. Mm-hmm. And so whether you and your family lives or dies is up to you. It's purely up to you.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's true, yeah.
And you have that pride at the end of your workday. You see the work in front of you.
Yeah, and I could think there's a certain it'd be cool to have a role in life that was unassailable, in a sense, where you do something masterfully and that's it. And like, that's something that's really missing from being a modern person for most people, for myself to an extent.
I don't think it's well, go ahead.
Well, like, it's not as easy to have a unassailable purpose because there's so many options and there's so many. That sounds cool.
That sounds joyous.
That sounds joyous.
Oh, it's a Jeep.
It's a Jeep.
An orange Jeep.
With children and a dope. Was it like a tiger on the back of it?
It kind of looks like a bear. That shape of that
Tigers,
face.
bears, whatever. Same.
Some savage animal face on the back of the orange Jeep.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's like you have to do a little more. Yeah, just have like an unassailable purpose is kind of cool. My friend Ryan, who I was van camping with last week.
Vamping.
Vamping. That's great. I'm gonna have to vamping. No, nothing. No, it's no vampire.
It's not
shit.
vampirical.
It's not vampiric.
Okay.
It's van. Yeah, it can be vampiric if you want to. That's the next step.
Empirical, one hopes, but not vampirical.
Empirical Vampirical. That's a cool band name. Oh my God, that's not the podcast.
It's definitely not, Stuart.
Vampiric. We're here to suck your energy.
Welcome to our vampire podcast.
After you get done
where we role play as vampires.
No, we're the vampire. The audience is the victim. By the time you get through this, we're energy vampires.
Yes, we're purely here to just suck your fucking energy.
You thought you were going to listen to a podcast and at the end you were going to feel inspired? Tough luck, asshole. No.
You are a fucking husk at the end.
You're going to feel shriveled. Yeah. And you're going to have to admit to yourself that's what you wanted. Yeah. Do you have an overinflated ego? Listen to us for a while. No. I'm just kidding.
I mean, plenty of shows amount to that effect.
Yeah, I know. No, you know what it is? It's called the mainstream media.
Yeah.
That's vampiric.
Yes.
If you want to feel like a shriveled husk, just scroll your mainstream news feed for a while and you'll be like, oh, great. Oh, a bunch of Palestinian children got blown up today.
And you're responsible.
And you're personally responsible. Yeah. Fuck, man. That's vampiric. So no,
you were with Ryan vamping.
I was vamping. It was a wholesome van camping expedition, and oh God, I got derailed. What the fuck was he?
You're thinking of the fisherman's life.
No, what was I gonna say?
The Tao.
Fuck. No, hold on.
Sorry.
I got this. Yeah, it was a band he was showing me, and he was this band it was like this weird Gen Z band, and it was like new. It was like kind of like a genre bending kind of as is everything Gen Z musical thing, and it was like experimental, and it was like a lot of the music, the beat and stuff was just like, okay, they're doing this is the novelty, this is like new. It was like kind of hard to place, and like the words were like you couldn't really make out the words, but it was pretty much just the same word purpose that was like they were just kind of screaming it over and over. It was like It was like some experimental beat, and it was like purpose, 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 and I was like the whole thing. And I was like, okay, so this is Gen Z music. And it's like, that's the thing. I was like, this is kind of fresh, It's
like meme music.
Yeah, it was like, but it was like a frantic, more raw kind of, it wasn't like boomer purpose music. It was like a raw, desperate purpose music. And it wasn't like it wasn't like I just got my T-Bird and I'm cruising down the freeway and, America is economically ascendant. It was more like like, purpose! You know, it was more like a frantic, like...
Desperately grasping for a phantom of purpose.
Yeah.
With the physical knowledge that you need it or you're gonna die.
Exactly. And I was connected to that because I was like, maybe that's why that Asian fisherman thing is like beautiful to me. Because,
well, there's unconscious purpose acting itself out a little more instinctually.
Yeah, and there's less insecurity of purpose. There's less flexibility, but there's less insecurity.
Well, there's a responsibility now to make your own purpose.
Absolutely.
In the same thematic sense of writing a novel.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, 100%. Yep. Yeah, it's a novel. One aspect of novelty is purpose, and much like the forms of literature that have arisen in our time, there's a kind of metaphysical novelty that's required to survive.
Ayn Rand makes a shape metaphor out of it, where the primitive man lived a circle, and it's timeless.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere. The modern man draws straight lines.
Yeah.
He starts at A, he projects a B, and he creates his line of how he's going to get from his A to that B. And its trajectory. And we've all chosen and are continuing to choose linearity as a more exciting, thrilling experience than the circle, or we'd be creating that fisherman life for ourselves. The fact that we're not doing that is us stating that we'd rather be drawing lines through our experience.
Yeah, our life is...
drawing lines with our experience.
Our life is ballistic, in a sense.
Yes.
Ballistic, that's a cool fucking word.
It's a sick fucking word, yeah.
Ballistic.
It's like dangerous almost.
Ballistic.
Well, obviously dangerous. But like...
That could be a name for the
just
podcast.
like saying it is kind of like violent in my...
ballistic. I think ballistic is...
my nicotine-addled mind right now.
Yeah, like you're launched, you grew up, and you had to just like, there was a tidal wave of things, and so you just get launched on a trajectory, and you're like tracing this parabolic arc, and you don't know where the fuck you're gonna land, and you're just trying to keep your motion going so that you don't fall short.
Yeah.
That's the modern conception of time and purpose.
I've created a integration of both of those polarities personally.
The linear and the circle?
Mm-hmm. In the metaphor of the bicycle.
Oh, whoa, cool.
Because the chain wheel that your pedals are going
absolutely.
Is a circle. Mm-hmm. From the point of view of my feet and my legs and the chain wheel, it's a circle going nowhere. It's purely just circular movement for its own sake. Mm-hmm. And I use that action to go places linearly. And that's related to playing the rest in my week. I conceptualize my week as a circle. My monthly cycle of activity with a week of rest period, that's another circle. And all I do in a moment-to-moment thing is reach the next part of the circular rhythm infinitely. And it's my mind projecting linear goals that gives that timeless experience of a nap every day, a sacred day of rest every week, a week of leisure every 5 weeks or so. That circular timelessness is given meaning and value by where that bicycle is going.
That's a cool metaphor. Yeah, bicycle is a really cool illustration of the unity between circular and linear motion. I think it's almost built into the metaphor, though, that on some level the circular motion is not only for its own sake. I mean, I suppose if you were just sitting there and your bike was up on a stand and you were, zzz, you know what I mean? But it's in contact with the ground, so it's kind of also for the sake of moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about your very first prompt, just because it felt like it came so much from your own thoughts that I was not privy to. And all I was seeing was like the surface and question of a bunch of more subterranean thoughts. Do you remember the first prompt, or should I attempt to say it?
No, it was just something that came up in the discussion with Ade at Stoble. It was the idea that things that are potentially dangerous, and I mean things in a very broad sense, things that are dangerous might, like, that's a sign that they might be kind of like a useful, powerful tool. And it's like, sounds like a real, it's like, the more I think about it, the more obvious this is. Yes. So there's like a certain no shit quality to this.
Like things that are powerful also, you were pointing to a theme of powerful, useful tools being dangerous in excess.
Yeah, like for instance, the idea, and I guess it kind of speaks to the idea of balance, but every time I start going into balance, I'm like wary, because I'm wary of balance. I've never had a good relationship with balance, and I'm suspicious of it. And I think that balance is overrated.
So this is some kind of crazy tug-pull thing you have with your fisherman life.
Yeah.
Like you just said you wanted a complete beatific vision of balance.
I think that's one way, but I think that's entirely unsuited to the world we're living in. It's cool as an ideal in its own right, but I don't think it's appropriate. I think I don't think our world is balanced right now. I don't think the world calls for balance. I think it calls for extension and overextension. I think it calls for leaning unbalanced towards something and moving fast enough that you stay up and don't fall over. You know, I'm thinking like sprinters who are explosively kind of crouched on the starting line, and the whole time you're running, you're leaning forward.
Or a plane on a runway that expends more and more and more and more and more and more and more of its own energy.
Yeah.
Until it lifts off the ground.
Yeah. So with the, so I was thinking of the idea of like confidence. You'll never get anywhere without confidence. But there's been a lot of people who've been brought down by hubris, and taken to an extreme, unintegrated, unself-aware, unconscious. Not unconscious is the wrong word.
Unintegrated.
Unintegrated
is pretty good.
Yeah. Unintegrated is complete way to describe that. Yeah, confidence is a kind of blind confidence is liable to fuck you over, because you will overestimate your own abilities and be unprepared for what getting yourself into. And like for instance, like being a crypto trader, you can throw away so much money
with confidence
on the false belief. Yeah, exactly. And that is like trading. Everyone's, it's a relevant thing now because a lot of people are doing that. Is they're answering the call of like, there's this pressure in the world right now where there's this strong pressure to take a chance, because people are sensing that the world is not going to wait for them. The world is not going to offer them a path.
It's not going to give them a chance.
No,
it's not. Take the chance.
Exactly. And so we're all becoming gamblers now. And there's a stupid way to do that. There's a lot of dumb ways to do that. And then there's a few smart ways. And predictably, there's a lot of memes that are rising up. Cryptocurrencies, which are concretized, mathematically formulated memes that are convincing people to take a chance. Like, do you really want to be working this 9-to-5 job? Look at all these people out here. Look at these YouTubers. Look at these people who have seized something, who've made something. Okay, I'm gonna put all my money into Dogecoin. And then, well, big mistake. Because all the people who did that in the beginning, that was real confidence because they were doing it before they had all this social support. That was the right thing to do.
It was the fruit of long labor and long habits that made them make wise Dogecoin decisions.
Yeah, and by the time you heard about it, you're actually the sucker. And that's a perfect illustration of that thing where being, it's, like placing a bet on something unknown is a kind of confidence, but when you start to objectify and idealize the specific instances of confidence, you lose the real thing, and it'll come back and bite you. And there's more. This is more general than just cryptocurrency. It's it's also like your friends, how much you lean on them. Are you the kind of person who, because I think on both ends of the extreme, there's the kind of person who abuses their friendships by just assuming everyone else is an infinite well of generosity, and you're just more on the take end of the spectrum. And then there's a person who's like a fucking doormat, and you're on the give end of the spectrum. And a healthy relationship is the integration of generosity and exploitation. Exploitation is a dirty word because oftentimes exploitation is not reciprocated. But in a good relationship, you have created relationships generally, even among friends, like there's a certain you allow, you're like, you can lean on each other as necessary, but you are aware of the extent to which doing so is productive. And that's like, I think an example of that, like a relationship, relating to people, being able to lean on people, allowing yourself to do that, and not feeling bad about it is a powerful tool that can really help you in life. But it can also ultimately make you someone who's not worth having a relationship with if you do that too much. I'm thinking, or like a physical metaphor of this, perhaps even appropriate to the next salon thing, is fire. Is a physical example of something. It's like, that's like the quintessential, as it were, example of that is
so powerful, so dangerous in excess.
Yeah, humans would never have gotten anywhere without fire, but we certainly we wouldn't have gotten out of tropical climates. We would have still been in Eden, but we made fire, and fire's super powerful and it's super dangerous.
Yeah,
burn your whole house down.
The wielding of it on the part of the conscious mind has gotten us as far as we are now. You've got the internal combustion engine as this like ultimate symbol of harnessing the most explosive force we know about.
Yeah, political power is like that. Hierarchy is like that. Having, I remember going to like this little
You've got a red-tailed hawk fighting with a crow over there.
My money's on the crow.
They were just fighting right in front of us here, and now they're off behind the gun range.
Oh.
That was sick.
That's awesome. I hope the crow wins. I'm really partial to crows.
No, dude. That hawk is obviously protecting a nest or like a hunting ground or something.
Oh, okay.
Where like the crow can fucking get his goods literally anywhere.
Yeah, the crow is kind of like a bandit.
Yeah.
That's true. That's probably why I like the crow. Yeah. But what was I going to say about, like, in terms of like power being like that, where if I remember when I was like a kid and I was like in like elementary school, and I'm sort of like bane to admit this because I've always like ragged on like the usefulness of those like little summer camps you go to or whatever. But I went to one of these little summer camps, and there was like this activity where it was like meant to like teach you something or whatever, where like you had to do like this it was like Survivor kind of, like you had to do this little complicated task with like people, and ultimately the sort of thing that came out of it was that, you know, if you don't have a leader that is coordinating things, you're not going to get anywhere. I think there's a lot of truth to that. A lot of times you have to have somebody in charge to get things done.
That was one of the lessons of the activity.
That was what I took away from it. And I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but this, yeah. I mean, there's many examples of this. Like, you can't have a business be run by a bureaucracy. To the extent that businesses are run by bureaucracies and decisions are made by a committee, you end up making shitty decisions that are unexceptional and
not timed to reality properly.
Yeah, because everyone is too cautious, and there's not enough. There's no, like, you need to locate the, you need to create, like, the locus of power needs to be within an individual's mind so that good decisions can be made. And if you spread out that locus to too many people, you're not going to be able to make any decisions, and you're going to go with whatever the de facto default consensus is, which might not be the most optimal thing. So that's like an argument for the necessity of some type of hierarchy in human activities. And of course, then we have history, which is, or, you know, like very recent history, current, present moment, not even history, you know, where you see like political power and you see hierarchy just be unbounded, and then you end up with like iron-fisted dictatorships that crush dissent and hold on to power beyond any kind of useful purpose, purely for its own sake. And that's like a wildfire. It's escaped its containment vessel. It's no longer useful. It's become destructive. And, you know, we don't have really a choice as humans whether or not we want to fuck with fire anymore. We don't have a choice of whether we want to fuck with computers. We don't have a choice of whether we want to fuck with hierarchy. The world is complex and challenging enough that we need to use these tools, but we haven't learned how to handle them yet. I don't know if we ever really will. So, yeah, I was thinking about, I guess, to bring that back down to a personal level where it started, was that certain attitudes, like, it's just, like, anytime you, like, it's kind of like, I guess, a special case of, like, the idea of, like, shadow work or whatever, but, like, when you have something that goes like, man, I need to stay away from that, that's dangerous. Tobacco, cigarettes, that's playing with fire. It is. But at the same time, in small doses, it's like it indicates to you, like,
it's fire controlled at our fingertips.
Yeah.
It's the danger of addiction.
Exactly.
Wielded by the power of our force of will.
Yeah, so it's like it's a sandboxed environment in which you can play with things that have the potential to destroy you. I mean, I have some hard limits with regard to this. Like, I would never fuck with heroin just because, you know what I mean?
You wouldn't?
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't smoke opium?
I don't think so. No.
I would.
That's a valid decision. I've thought about it. I don't think I would, though. I don't know. I think I can't speak for myself forever, but at this moment, I think that I wouldn't do that because I have some lines drawn that are like, you know, it's risk assessment.
Most things I would try chemically, and drug-wise. Most things I would try. My line there is just method of ingestion. As soon as you have to get a syringe and a needle involved, it's like, what the fuck are you doing and why? Or snorting things too. As soon as you have to snort something to get it into your body, that's telling me that, like, you're doing something for the wrong reasons.
But is snorting really that different than smoking?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, smoking is using a system you already have built in of breathing, like physical, like vapors and aromas and smokes are meant to be breathed in. Physical things are not meant to get forcibly sniffed up your nose. That's just not what your body's built to do.
I mean, air, certainly. Physical thing, right? Yeah, I know what you're saying. Sorry.
You fucking know what I'm
Sorry.
saying.
I know what you're saying. Yeah. That makes sense. All right, so that's where you've drawn the line, huh?
Yes. So I would take heroin. I would take a pill maybe under the right circumstances. But much more likely than that, I would like smoke opium, like Chinese opium den style. But shooting up a thing is like, it seems bad.
Yeah.
It just seems straight up bad.
I guess for me, I think it's kind of like the culture around something can indicate, how destructive something is ultimately. I mean, I don't know about opium dens. I don't think we have, at least I don't have any cultural exposure to opium. Mm-hmm. I've never even seen opium. I don't know what it looks like when people smoke opium. My image of people.
Yeah, me neither.
I have really? I think
there's like a long pipe involved.
Yeah. If I imagine a bunch of like old, wise Zen master looking dudes, I don't actually think Zen smoked anything, but maybe this is more like, this shows you how much I know about this. Some vaguely Oriental, perhaps even Central Asian, like a bunch of like old guys, and they're like some kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, there's a kind of cultural like enfranchisement built around there, and they're not on the street in a gutter, fucking underneath an overpass, shooting up like. So, I don't know if it's even possible to replicate those conditions in the world where you have that level of social belonging and stability that you can fuck with opium. I think the problem, I think maybe like those drugs are not suited really to the place of instability where we are now, because it requires a really stable situation.
Psychedelics are another thing.
Well,
of
psychedelics
playing with fire.
I feel like psychedelics are very well suited to our modern moment, though.
Incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous in excess.
Yeah.
I haven't had a trip in a long time because it's a delicate moment of balance where like the driving forward, the expending of my own energy towards my goal more and more and more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
Like is still using the fuel of all the trips I've had in my past. And it just be a little too destabilizing to have too much more of that mutant influence introduced right now, because so much focus and juggling of moving factors needs to be managed right now. But psychedelics in their ideal sense kind of is the same theme as why you would take a nap in the middle of your day and a day of rest every week, is you want this check-in moment. Like taking drugs is checking in on all of those moving things that you're juggling and stress testing the whole pattern that you have.
Yeah. I have the same thought process with regard to that. Although I'm not entirely sure how much of that is. For me, it's difficult to tease apart genuine wisdom from just trepidation, or not like even sort of trepidation, not like of what I'm getting myself into, but for me it always takes the form of what I deserve. I have yet to fully shake off this idea that this like emotional basis that was probably given to me by growing up in a Protestant Christian context, that like
do all your chores first.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Before playtime.
100%. Yeah, and the idea of being able the idea that somehow work is play, is it's a concept that is I hold as a goal. Like my work, I actively try to have fun with my work. I actively stop working if I'm not having fun. I don't even try to work if I'm not having fun. I've been really fortunate to find programming, because to me programming is just video games, and I love doing it. And even if I wasn't building a product, I would still want to fuck with code because it's fucking fun.
Sick.
And that has been the only basis of my progress, is this is fun. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm addicted to this. Every day I have the urge to get on a computer and like make stuff, and it's like my play. It's my main activity. So that I don't know why I have so much trepidation, thinking something like mushrooms are going to make me realize that like everything is a bit more whimsical than I might have labeled it as. I think I'd be perfectly able to handle that, and I have handled that fine in the past. But yeah, there's just this part of me that still is like have you accomplished enough that you can, get rewarded? You reward yourself with this. Like I said, go back to the day of rest thing too. Do you have you done enough that you can like justify taking a break? And my default answer is like no. Like I'm just stuck on like nope. Don't even start thinking about that yet, because I sense like this danger that as soon as I start, like you know what it is also too, and I've broken this a long time ago, but I used to, and I still maintain this sometimes depending on who I'm talking to. I'm very hesitant to tell people my goals, because I have learned, or I have this idea that a lot of times talking about what you're trying to do is a way of short-circuiting your own.
I agree.
Yeah, where you're sort of like you're getting yourself the reward of having people be like, you're like fishing for people to say like, wow, that's so cool what you're doing. And you're like, yeah, thanks, yeah.
Yeah, guess I'm done.
Yep. And it just chips away your motivation. Better to keep it secret and then just do it. And then like, this is what I did. Just have it be done. Or like when you're launching.
Totally.
When you're launching a product, like a website or an app or something, it's so common now to just like put up like a splash page and go like, this is what we're building. And yeah, it's supposed to, it's good. Like the thing you're supposed to do is create a splash page and then collect email addresses, start building your mailing list. And it's like, well, that's cool, because then you get, it logically makes sense that you want to have people following your project. Don't wait till it's done, because you're wasting all that time that you could be gathering an audience and stuff. But at the same time, you get a little bit of satisfaction every time someone signs up to your mailing list.
Yeah.
You make a fucking prototype. Then just for your own edification, that you can then ask people to care about it. I think you should have something more concrete. And I mean, I feel confident in saying that I do think that like at least I can only speak to like the online ecosystem of people trying to make startups and stuff, there's even a word for it, vaporware. Vaporware is real. And a lot of shit is vaporware, and
yes.
You might be able to, even if you're not familiar with that term, imagine what that is. It's just this thing that never quite gets done, and then you sign up for it, and then 3 years later you're still getting updates about this is what, and it's like, no, this has just become an endless thing that you're working towards, that the goal is no longer to do it, because maybe you ran into some problems along the way.
Yeah.
But what you do have is you're still performatively working towards this unattainable thing, because people are expecting you to now, and it's just unproductive use of time. Happens in government programs where pretty soon they just like what's the example of like the space rocket? Sometimes I go on like SpaceX places on the internet where like people are like just like circle jerking about like rockets and shit, and there's a common thread in those things of like, oh, look at the government, they can't build a rocket in 20 years, it's just a jobs program. And it's like there's a certain amount of truth to that like you come up with this $10 billion idea to build this complicated system to launch astronauts and do all this stuff, and the next thing you know, it doesn't work out, people retire, the vision's gone, and yet there's thousands of people whose jobs and employment depends upon continuing to extend these contracts to build an ever more massive thing. And it might never get done. It's
probably a big secret to all of Elon Musk's resistance that institutions have thrown up against him up to this point, is because his action is calling bullshit on all the performative illusions of action.
Yeah, he's results oriented.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's just all about prototypes, iteration, and like there's something really powerful about that, where it's like a form of calling your own bluff, or not allowing yourself to bluff, holding yourself accountable for actually accomplishing measurable steps.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful way to do things. There's a danger in just creating a fantasy land of your own progress towards things.
I'm going back to the danger you feel in resting, and my conception of it is so different in my experience because my goals are too big to not rest constantly. Like the only way to get there in any measurable sense week to week to week is to rest often. And it's like I just spin my wheels and start grinding the gears real quick if I don't stop and rest at regular intervals. The limit I come up against during rest periods is the basic same theme that you're talking about, where I can't actually rest when it's time to, because I'm not like convinced that I should. And so that's where the very ability to rest is this super necessary muscle you need to develop, because none of us are good at it. None of us know how to do it. And so we don't have a way of fueling our own engines from inside. Like, we're supposed to be able to fuel ourselves from within. That's called a nap. And that just makes you being able to fully set everything down and engage in a meditation practice twice a day, for example, and just fully engage the present moment instead of focusing on goals and stuff. It's really important, and it's a way to refresh yourself and give yourself more fuel and more clarity of thought. And I have to like get better and better and better at like recognizing like, okay, I'm in a rest time. So like, what is the nature of rest? What is the nature of play? What is the nature of like relief? How the fuck do I even do that?
Yeah.
And it's hard in our society that takes motion and purpose for granted. But bigger motions and bigger purposes require deeper and deeper reservoirs of energy.
Well, I mean, it's possible that your experience as a musician informs your assessment of that as necessary.
Sure. Like, there's an immediate metaphor in heavy metal music where intense music creates listeners' fatigue.
Yeah.
And if a live performance doesn't have quieter moments and more beautiful songs, then the more savage, intense parts of the music lose their meaning.
Kind of flat.
Yes.
Yeah.
It just becomes a flat line because it's all at 10 out of 10.
Do I have it?
I don't know, dude.
I'm frequently the person who has it in my pocket.
I delegated a lighter to you so that we could.
Oh, that was your first mistake.
So we could not have this issue.
God damn it! Hold on.
Well, I have to pee anyway. So.
Oh, here it is. Sitting on it. You know.
Okay, let's see.
What are the other things we had on the thing?
No, I'm just gonna jump into the philosophy of each other thing.
Let's do it. See where it goes.
Okay, so Stuart's philosophy.
Oh, we're doing this, huh?
Is.
All right, let it rip.
It's some kind of explorative process of discovery. Like, I think of your first, like, pulls of the slot machine in your life where you acted for some of your first times in your life on, like, a gut feeling and, like, took a chance, and, like, moving to Finland was some sort of chance-taking move that you'd never done before. And I don't clearly know your adventure with Ethereum in the beginning and investing in it, but that seems like another instance of acting on more of a gut feeling, see what happens sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then both of those were instances of the universe answered you in a very surprising and compelling way.
Yeah.
And I see your journey so far as testing that, scaling up that process that happened in micro with, like, the Finland trip.
Yeah.
And so, well, feeling a certain thrill of discovery and excitement to this small extent, and then acting on it to the hilt, created this amazing experience. So now I'm going to act on a bigger intuition, gut feeling with a more amount of effort, and see how the universe answers me in that bigger, like, scaling up that sort of thing, and seeing what happens. And a zeitgeist of interest and fascination and discovery.
Yeah, that's about. I don't have any quarrels with that. That's true. Yeah, I've had a series of. I have a tendency to go all in on things.
To be clear, the prompt we're on right now is each of us is attempting to articulate the other person's philosophy of life.
Yeah, I think that is even, I don't know if it rises to the level of a philosophy, but that is definitely empirically the mode of being that I have acted out in my life, is going, not, is having a vague, not having so much a plan as just like some sort of transcendent vision of something, and then going all in and just sacrificing everything else for a thing. And it's happened, there's been a few cycles and iterations of that. Yeah, Finland was one of them. That actually wasn't the first time I took a massive chance, actually. It was the second.
Well, what was the first?
The first was moving to San Diego.
Oh, okay.
And just noping the fuck out of Butte College. And
you were pretty close to a degree.
Yeah.
And you dropped the whole thing and moved to San Diego.
I've noped out of a degree that I was almost done with twice. Almost 3 times.
Wow.
But I noped out of, because when I graduated high school, I started working at Air Union. I was doing airplane mechanic stuff.
Wow, that's sick.
And did it for a year. Eventually realized it was bullshit. Noped out of that. And my way of noping out of that oppressive 9 to 5 thing was to go to San Diego, and I was possessed with the romantic notion of living on a boat. Because of one story that I read in an old copy of National Geographic from like the 60s, where this guy just bought a boat and like sailed everywhere, and I was like, I want to do that. So that became my thing I fixated on for years. Was just, that was like at the time I specifically remember, it was one, I should probably look up, I should probably find that story and like cut it out and frame it or something, because that was a super important little thingy that I just latched onto for some reason, because that was like, I think the thing that to me represented the fact that that life actually was some sort of unbounded, and there wasn't a requirement to go straight from school to work to, that was like, I was like, wait, I can escape the pipeline, let's do it. And I did, and I just jumped on that. Emotionally, I seized on that idea
too.
Before I even
Me too.
And so I just noped the fuck out of the on-ramp that I was on, having grown up, going to the right.
Like the first inkling you had that you didn't have to actually do that.
Yeah.
You leaped on it.
I noped out, and then, my best friend, Lane, I convinced him to come with me. I don't know how the fuck I convinced him, but I convinced him. So we went to San Diego. And that was a great, and then but then the problem with these ill thought out goals is that they tend to, after a while, if they don't, like they tend to, I had to nope out of the boat after a while too, because I was like, what am I doing here? I'm not excited about school anymore, because I was like studying physics and stuff, and then I started to just get like.
You were studying physics in San Diego once you started boat life?
Yeah, because my goal up until that point was to be a theoretical physicist. I wanted to be like Stephen Hawking, and I wanted to figure out like cosmology. Like I wanted to understand the black holes, the Big Bang, time. Like I used to read just fuck ton of books about astrophysics and quantum physics and electromagnetic stuff. Like I used to just I was like super deep in physics, and that was the meaning of my life up until that point, because I just wanted to understand the universe. And at some point that started to become, I don't know, I think unconsciously I sensed that I was all in my head, and there was a kind of emotional, humanistic aspect of life that I was sorely deprived of. And it turns out I was right. And that's what Finland answered for me, was the girl who I was with at the time, which was the reason I ended up going to Finland specifically. I think I would have gone somewhere elsewhere in any case, but that was a pretty convenient coincidence that I went there and was immediately transplanted into an entirely different milieu of art students, literature students, and people of that nature that were...
And the humanities, as opposed to physics.
The humanity, culture, music, just feminine energy in general, which I had not had, because my upbringing was distinctly materialistic, distinctly masculine.
Military.
Military, very much like almost like that old school kind of like let's get like real things, like real like come on, what are you trying to say? Like not this wishy-washy stuff, like and that's why my whole language about the world was pointed, clipped, direct. You know what I mean? And that was just I don't think that always conflicted with me. I was like, I was wrapped in a shell of that, but my inner soul is not that at all. I think I found a lot of, it was good for me to get another get like a injection of that kind of wishy-washy, mushy, sensitive shit. It was super, super important, and that so I guess it worked out. And in a way, I actually think about the current project I'm working on, Satellite, as being like almost like a synthesis of those two things, where it's engineering and it's art at the same time. And
very much so.
And it's it requires both elements, and the two can't exist without each other. If it was just, there's a million crypto projects out there that are created by programmers who are very much in that kind of culture blind state where they just only see numbers, they only see systems, they see code, they see functions and processes and stuff like that, and it's very much like you're building a machine. And a machine might be functional, but it's not inspiring. It's not. It doesn't speak to the human condition. It doesn't have a good aesthetics. It looks terrible. The visual design is shit.
It makes you think like a machine.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of being a human and making the machine think like you.
Yeah, and you can see this is playing out right now in, like, for example, NFTs. How there's these people in the world who've come up with this idea that you can just take a shitty JPEG image and charge $1 billion for it, and they've gotten people to do it because those people are just as lost as they are. And it's just this blindness that's just like this disgusting expression of completely unappreciating. Like, it's almost like makes you cringe how the shittiest kind of like we were talking about this before. I think you even brought it up, and now I'm connecting to this. Like, the shittiest form of culture and art and stuff is being monetarily rewarded out of the sheer lack of alternatives for things. And so I think, like, the emphasis on design and feeling is really important to counterbalance the inhospitableness of of crypto and associated technologies, and just even computers in general. There's something very depersonalizing about computer networks, but there's also something very empowering about them. So we're struggling to import our humanity to the networks we've created. But yeah, I digress. I don't have much else to say about that.
Yeah, so now you do me.
So I think that I'm just going to shoot from the hip.
That's all I did.
Good. I would say individualism is probably your highest ideal, where you have almost like a militant take on the importance of individualism and romanticism, which goes along with that. I think that you have probably, from what I know about your upbringing, always felt like a bit of an outsider, a bit of an alien. You don't have any siblings, do you?
By choice.
Okay, right. Yeah, well, you've never talked about that.
An overabundance of siblings.
Really? See, the fact that I don't know about this almost speaks to the point that it is not something that you have made part of yourself. I guess that's a different story, isn't it? But I think that, I think you kind of have this. You're like the the real artist archetype to a T. Music is the way that you express your individualism, and I think your life's philosophy is oriented around creating artifacts in the world that express what's inside of you, and you're kind of engaged in this two-pronged effort to constantly dig deeper into your unconscious, dredge the material to the surface, and create an ever higher Tower of Babel made of the bricks that you've dredged from the bottom of the sea. So, the artist archetype, in a word, I guess. That's my fucking shot-off shotgun from the hip, scatter shot impression. I don't have any special insight on this. I think that's fairly apparent to most people. because again, being an artist, you put a lot of emphasis on expression, so people don't have to guess what it is you're about.
They've had to in the past, though.
Really?
Which is like dictated some of my challenges needing to be addressed.
So when you were young, I suppose I've only known you when the whole context of me knowing you has been in the context of first you were working on Hells, and then now you're working on your new album. So you've been making an album, and I sort of think, you're finishing your album is probably your biggest concrete goal at the moment. Mm-hmm. If I think I'm correct in assuming that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have kind of a specific concrete example of something, but it kind of is a metaphor for the overall project of life.
And integrating the best things about nature with the best things about being a man and being a free-willed consciousness. Like the action day-to-day of making the new album Accelerant is a day-to-day process of nature. Is the circle is of following my nose to where creativity is happening that day and watering the garden, but seeing what plants are choosing to send up sprouts and growing those and following that naturalistic process everywhere it leads and keeping an eye on the specific pieces of it that fit with the goal of making Accelerant. And then when those things come up, everything gets funneled into fleshing that out into the next step of the album. Mm-hmm. And that reaches fruition and completion. And then I go back circularly to the gardener, just walking in nature, following my nose again, making, like I showed you a track from the band a month or two ago called Feed Your Living Joy. And it was full rock, bombastic, huge explosion of light kind of song. And then I went back into just explorative discovery, nature, and I sent you that piano-based track a week ago that represented that other part of the circle.
The anima.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that maybe that's one of the biggest areas of overlap between our, to proceed to the synthesis stage, is the overlap is that this, like we talked about before, like the integration of the masculine and feminine through art, or
through creativity.
Yeah, it's a stretch through. I'm looking for a word that's art's not. Maybe the older meaning of the word art, which just meant like craft or something like that. Concretization.
Yes.
That's something that, is a more general concept of being an artist. I think that I come at creativity. I'm rooted in a much more conscious, explicit form of creativity, and I've found an avenue to do that. And your native territory is the unconscious, and you're concretizing it. And my native territory is the conscious, and I'm unconsciousifying it. No, I am.
Cool.
And it's like it's
very poetic.
Yeah, it's like this. It's just funny. It's like we're both we're integrating this similar things from different directions, and I think that that's compelling because it's cool to. Yeah, it's a good match with regard, because I think that if we were both musicians or we were both programmers, I think this would be less interesting. or at least less expansive.
Well, the nature of our collaboration would be in the medium that we shared.
Yeah. It'd be deeper, but less wide.
We'd program something together, or we'd make music together.
No, we would. Yeah, we would be. If you were a programmer, we'd be working on the same thing, and vice versa. Yeah, no, totally.
The scope of the project would expand pretty fast, I imagine.
Well, the funny thing is actually Ryan, who I'm working on Satellite with, is actually not a programmer specifically. He's a designer.
Yeah.
So I've almost found that, and
Right.
he's contributed immensely to Satellite through softening it. And I've learned a lot from him. He's been almost like the muse for the part of me that is attempting to do that in myself, and I've gained a lot of polish from that relationship. And I never really asked him about this, but that's something I perceive.
Our joint collaboration is the podcast, and our action is simply to water it on a regular basis and make sure we tend to its needs when it declares a new need, if it's going to keep growing. And here we are out in Upper Park, expanding the location of it, and the van life edition is we're starting to use the van life ability to put the podcast in more diverse locations physically, and that's like the root system of the podcast plant. The root system is reaching out in every direction it can so that it's not planted in one physical setting, for example. It's reaching for, okay, we got that physical setting on lock of like 5 Mile backside, for example. So now it needs to reach out to new places. So it has a bigger web of roots.
Yeah, that's true. I think there's something to be said for the kind of podcast that's in a familiar studio. Like, I remember watching the OG JRE's original Gangster Joe Rogan Experience, for those who are challenged by acronyms. And it was, sorry, I'm not giving enough credit to people here.
I don't think you are.
I'm not. But also, I just love the word original gangster. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, original. But yeah, because like seeing the familiar backdrop and stuff is kind of cool because you feel like you're like walking into a familiar setting. But it's also kind of cool to have like the unrooted, adaptive location. That's cool too. That feels more in line with what I'm doing.
See, it's his stability and familiarity is in the form of the studio, in the same studio every time, and the explorativeness and the branching outness is in the form of the guests.
Oh, we're kind of the inverse.
It's the inverse for us.
Yeah, because we have several central themes that we...
And there aren't any guests. The familiarity is...
Which is why there's central themes.
It's just us.
Of course.
So the newness and the explorativeness and the trying new places thing is serving that.
That just gave me something I had never even thought of. The concept of a guest on this podcast. Well, we've had a couple impromptu guests, like when Alden walked up that one time. A couple times we were sitting in 1 Mile when we were still doing it there for the audio version, and he was like, "What's up, guys?" Yeah. And we talked about I remember he like quoted some philosophical and it was like pretty cool actually. It was like, that was great. That added some really that was like a really fun thing. Yeah, that would be crazy to have like a formal guest where I think you could. I feel like almost that's like what the salon is preparing for a little bit. Is
preparing us for? Okay.
Is like how to have a multi-way conversation.
A little bit more round table.
Yeah, and a little bit more, because a two-person relationship, even beyond what beyond, it's more general than just a podcast, but a two-person dynamic is like ping pong. It's like boom, 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 and we have a really good ping pong. I remember we didn't before. In the beginning, it was like we were like over talking each other a lot, but like now it's this. We have a good like thing, and
the Zoom meetings were great for training that.
That really put a point on that, because there's a little bit of a lag in the conversations. Yeah, and I think introduce a third person. You ain't playing ping pong anymore. What the fuck are you even? And so it's way harder to calibrate. Wait, who's going to talk now? And so there's the necessity of interjecting, and that's something that I struggle with, because my tendency is to monopolize conversations, and it's easy to train that out of myself when I'm doing ping pong, but it's much harder. I'm always conscious of that at the salon. I'm always aware of my like word budget, and I consciously digress.
So far you're erring on the side of saying too little.
Yes.
At the salon.
Yeah, because I'm aware of how I can go off on a huge tangent and lay out 20 different points that no one's going to be able to adequately respond to, and then it's not as entertaining anymore, because now everyone's listening to the thing is like, I want, so, which is good though. I feel like that group, at least as it's been so far, is it's balanced enough that I have faith that if I stop talking, someone else will, like mostly you, honestly, will bring up another point or whatever, or facilitate the thing. And but I think having a guest on the podcast would be interesting, because presumably the way I imagine the point of a guest is to give a better portion of the word budget to the guest. So, because that's the whole point of having them there, is to get their perspective, because it's new.
And they have the largest word count, ideally.
Exactly. And so I would interject for the purposes of adding to points or facilitating them, or redirecting the conversation when it started to trail off or whatever. But that's a whole different art form.
I think of that purely in this moment. I think of that purely in terms of hardware.
Interesting.
And hardware, we don't physically have the hardware for more than 2 people.
Yeah. Right
now, and we don't even have satisfactory hardware for 2 people ultimately. The next step is a better camera and better microphones. But when I upgrade in those forms, I can then just add the lower quality equipment that we're using now as additional angles of the newer video equipment that will take its place. When we have a better camera, then that frees up this camera to be B-roll footage and a second angle on things.
Oh, interesting. That'd be cool.
That I can cut to every once in a while for visual, to make things pop more visually.
Right.
By contrast and stuff. And getting better microphones will then free up these 2 lapel mics then we have 4 microphones instead of 2.
That'd be awesome to have, like, ultimately a camera on me, on you, and then like both.
And the whole thing, yep.
Yeah, because then like if there's someone who goes into like a monologue, you can just boom. Or like for emphasis or something, that'd be cool. Of course, it would massively increase the editing work, but...
That's what Lex has got going on.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And there's software, like the video editing program I have right now, I'm like 90% sure you can just, in effect, hit a button and have it change angles based on who's
cool.
talking.
That's pretty cool.
Because Lex does everything himself at this point.
Oh, really? I assumed he had a producer.
No, it's all him up to this point.
Why?
Well, he's hiring people right now.
Okay, yeah, right.
And so I'm sure it's just completely automated, that changing of angles aspect to it.
Yeah.
And that requires a new interface, because this interface can only take 2 mics at the moment. I mean, there's all these holes in the back.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it's a lot.
So maybe I just don't know how to use these holes. Once I do, this interface will continue to be fine, even when we have more speakers.
Awesome.
I'm also gonna keep building this setup, this mobile studio setup, and make more podcast products besides this podcast.
Oh, cool.
Like, I want to do things with Jade, and I want to do things with Jordan, and it came from the Jordan idea, because I can't get him to commit to anything rhythmic, but I could get him into like a single night.
One-off kind of.
A one-off thing.
Yeah, no. That's cool. If you have a setup and you have the production already, it's like an easy invitation for someone to be like, do you want to just, that's cool. Yeah, you might as well if you've already established the infrastructure for doing something. It's like not that hard, the marginal cost, as it were.
Just start monetizing more and more of my Hangouts.
Spare capacity, yeah. It's awesome.
Like with Jade and I, it's more of a cultural and art commentary sort of thing. So we could watch a movie and then take a few minutes after the movie to gather our thoughts, and then make an hour-long one-off video out of it.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Dude, man, I think we should call it. It's fucking hot.
Yeah, I'm just now getting what you've been in for like 30 minutes now, sunlight-wise.
Dope. Good pod.
Yeah, all the machinery is
fans on.
in direct sunlight too.